It is a catastrophe so large for the NHS that you can see it from space. So says the man who until not so long ago was in charge of the NHS in England, the former chief executive, Sir David Nicholson. He was, though, speaking not just of the strike, but of ministers' decision to impose a contract on junior doctors having failed to get their agreement. In a moment, we'll speak to the man who, according to Sir David, is the only person who could have stopped that catastrophe, the Health Secretary, Jeremy Hunt. First, though, our health editor, Hugh, who's at Guy's in St Thomas's Hospital, just over the river from the House of Commons.
Yes, good morning, Nick. I'm just outside St Thomas's Hospital. This action has just begun, this first ever walkout by a group of doctors from all forms of care in the history of the NHS, very much uncharted territory. And I'm joined by two junior doctors, Dr. Nadia Masood and Dr. Janis, both of whom have slightly differing perspectives on this action, this escalation of this strike action. So first of all, Nadia Masood, how can you justify walking out on all forms of care, your patients in all parts of hospitals, including emergencies?
Well, I'd just like to remind everybody that there will be emergency and urgent care provided today by very experienced colleagues and consultants. And I'm very, very hand on my heart, can genuinely believe that in my department, in my hospital, it will be the same level of emergency and urgent care that was provided on the previous strike days.
But how can you be certain of that? Because senior management in the NHS are saying the public should expect essential care, but there is apprehension. This has never happened before.
This has never happened before, so nobody does know what to expect. But we have had more than a month to plan for this, and I know that in my hospital there have been planning meetings taking place between the juniors and the consultants where they have gone over how many people are needed in which departments, and I am satisfied that there are enough people providing the right care today and tomorrow.
Now, Dr. Janis, you have, I think, misgivings about this escalation of the action. You supported it before when it affected routine care. Where do you stand now?
I think it's very difficult to justify removing emergency care. For me as a doctor, the day that I say I'm not willing to provide emergency care is the day that I no longer consider myself a doctor. I think providing emergency care is fundamental to being a doctor. However, because I'm not scheduled to provide emergency care today, I will be going to the picket line at my hospital. I am with Nadia. I completely oppose the contract. I am very unhappy about it, but I do think it's sort of symbolically, it's very difficult to justify removing emergency care.
So, if you're on shift, you'd have been in the hospital, and will you be working tomorrow, the second day of the strike?
Again, I'm not scheduled to provide emergency care tomorrow, but had I been, I would have gone into work.
And if this action continues or is escalated further, you will go into work if there is another action like this?
I think I will go into work, yes, if it's for removing emergency care and I am scheduled to provide emergency care on the day of the strike, then I will go into work. I will strike if I'm scheduled to provide elective care, but emergency care is something that I will always provide.
But what do you say to the argument of Nadia and others that the consultants and other senior staff are providing the care and that they've been reassured, and that to carry on making their point, they need this all-out action?
Well, I think it's very difficult because, there's the practical aspect to striking and making sure that patients are going to be safe. I do believe that my consultants are more than capable of providing emergency care and doing so, very effectively. However, as I mentioned, it's a sort of a symbolic thing for me. I just don't feel that I can ever justify not providing emergency care as a doctor. It's a red line for me. I'm not willing to cross it.
Now, Nadia Masood, the government say that the BMA has refused to carry on talking, that several concessions, dozens of concessions were made. It's a fair contract. They are going to introduce it and press on, and that it is best for the medical profession, and that the union has not behaved well.
I would say to Jeremy Hunt and the government that they had one thing that they needed to do to avert today's strike, and that was to remove the imposition. It was very simple. Remove the imposition and talk more. As Janis said, we are all opposed to this contract. It is not safe, and I believe as a doctor and thousands of doctors today, it is our duty to protect our patients in the future from this dangerous and toxic contract.
OK, Nadia Masood and Janis here at St Thomas's Hospital. Thank you very much. Back to you.
Hugh Pym, thank you very much indeed. Well, with me in the studio is the Health Secretary, Jeremy Hunt. Mr. Hunt, do you agree with the words of Sir David Nicholson, who used to run the NHS in England? This is a catastrophe. And furthermore, do you agree it's your responsibility, it was your duty to avoid it?
Good morning, Nick.
Good morning.
It is a very, very bleak day for the NHS when something like this happens. But I would simply say this, that the reason this has happened is because the government has been unable to negotiate sensibly and reasonably with the BMA over a manifesto commitment that we made for a 7-day NHS. And the heart of this is that you can't choose which day of the week you're ill. And we are passionate about the NHS. We're putting into the NHS this year the 6th biggest increase in funding in its history. But we know from what's happened with previous governments, it's not just about the money you put in, it's making sure that the care you give to patients is better. And we want to be able to promise every patient in the NHS the same high-quality care every day of the week. That's what this is about.
That's an ambition that plenty of doctors share. The difficulty with your description, it seems to me, is this. Yes, you clearly have fallen out with the BMA. Yes, you blame the BMA. But tens of thousands of the brightest, most dedicated, most committed professionals in this country are so demoralised, so alienated, so angry that today they have done something they never did under Margaret Thatcher, they never did under any previous government. They've walked off the job. And they're telling you it's not the union's fault, it's your fault.
Well, I think if they knew some of the facts about how hard we'd tried to reach agreements, they might reconsider that. We've been trying to talk about this now for over 3 years. We've had 75 meetings. And if you look at the BMA's own Facebook posts, internal emails, they actually say that the whole thing boils down to principally an argument about payment for antisocial hours and in particular pay on Saturdays. And what we are offering in this new contract for doctors is more premium pay on a Saturday than the nurses who work in their hospital, than the paramedics, than the assistants who work in their own operating theatres, more than police officers, more than fire officers. It is a very fair deal. And, you know, the question is, and that's why I agree with what Dr. Burns said, given that, is it proportionate or appropriate to be withdrawing emergency care from patients who depend on them so much? And I think
here is the difficulty, though, you face, isn't it? Which is often, now I would suggest, you sound conciliatory. You're praised for having a good political bedside manner. But other things you say, other things the government say, suggest you are itching for a fight. Do you agree with the senior Downing Street source, or political source, we haven't been told where it was in government, who told the BBC, this is a political strike, it's like the miners' strike, it has to be defeated?
Well, the last thing we are doing is itching for a fight. Let's be absolutely clear about that. If you look at the evidence as to just how hard we have worked to try and settle this last
Do you agree?
November,
forgive me, these are words from a senior source.
No.
We don't know where they're from.
No.
It's a political strike. They're all over every Tory supporting newspaper. The Sun, the Telegraph, the Times, the Guardian quotes them too. Is it true or not?
Insofar as it is a political strike, I do think that there are some elements, not the majority, and certainly not the majority of junior doctors, but there are some elements at the very top of the BMA who are absolutely refusing to compromise. But there
would be serious consequences, as there were with the miners, many people believe, if this were not taken on and defeated.
Well, let me give you an example as to just how hard we have tried to try and solve this problem. In November, I agree, just taking up what Dr. Masood said just now. She said, why don't we lift the imposition of the contract? That's what I agreed to do in November, to try and give a chance for talks to succeed. And then I appointed a new person, someone completely independent, Sir David Dalton, to try and come in and broker a middle ground. I think we made 74 concessions to the BMA, and on that
let's just move on.
It's very important though, because on that crucial issue,
before you move on, forgive me.
Let me finish
the
the point.
The comparison with the miners' strike has been made by a senior government source. It's the editorial in the Daily Telegraph. Is it the view? Maybe it's not your view. Maybe it's the view in Downing Street that you're trying to be conciliatory, and they're saying, "Come on, Jeremy, punch them up. Let's defeat them. This is what we've got to do, or we'll face other public sector strikes elsewhere."
Well, I do not make a comparison with the miners' strike because the miners' strike left devastation that lasted for very many years. But what I will say,
that's precisely what people worry about with this strike, don't they? They worry about whatever the rights and wrongs that the workforce here will be so demoralised. Many will leave their jobs. Many will not wish to cooperate with any future change in the NHS. So the small thing you may think you're achieving will be overwhelmed by something worse.
Well, what I simply say is this, that we need to have a leadership in the BMA who are prepared to negotiate sensibly. And, I think independent people who looked at this carefully from the left as well as from the right have concluded that there was a total refusal to compromise, to come down, sit around the table, agree a sensible solution. And on the crucial issue of premium pay on Saturdays, the BMA said in writing in November that they would negotiate on that. They tore up that agreement in February. And, our choice as a government is very stark. Do we deliver a manifesto commitment for a 7-day NHS, that fundamental belief that if the NHS is going to be the safest, highest quality system in the world, then we need to be able to offer that same care every day of the week.
You see, you talk about the BMA in writing.
It's very important, this, because it was the first page of the Conservative manifesto. Okay. And the choice that they gave us was to tear up that manifesto commitment. And I say that no union, however powerful, however good they are at eliciting public sympathy, has a right to stop a government implementing something that the British people have voted for.
Seems to me you do think it's a political strike, but you've quoted the BMA in writing. Let me quote you in writing. Your letter to the BMA this weekend doesn't just talk about 7-day working. It talks about workforce and funding requirements. It talks about improvement in training. It talks about how you manage people's maximum hours, how you manage their work-life balance. Many junior doctors listening to this will be saying, yes, that is precisely our point. We will not sign this contract until those issues, far from being marginal, which are at the centre of our miserable experience as they see it in a very highly pressured NHS, till the government addresses those issues.
And that is exactly what I was offering to do in that letter. So what I said in that letter is we have the contractual things, which we tried very hard to reach an agreement. We had exhaustive talks lasting over 3 years, but we had a point-blank refusal to allow us to implement a manifesto commitment. But then there are all these other things that we can do, improving the training, improving the way the contract is implemented.
But that's no offer at all, Mr. Hunt, to say there are all these things you're worried about, and don't worry, we'll impose the contract, we'll plough on with the thing that you've actually, need your agreement for in normal circumstances, and then don't worry ahead, we'll deal with all that other stuff later.
But that's not what we're saying at all. What we're actually saying is that junior doctors who I do think work incredibly hard, I think they're the backbone of the NHS. I think we depend on them for the high quality service the NHS gives across the week. But there are lots of things they find very frustrating about their job in the contract at the moment, which we've tried to solve. And there are lots of things that are outside the contract, like the way the training works, like the fact that they find it difficult if their partner is based in Sheffield. They would also want to work in a hospital in Sheffield, and they find it difficult to do that. We have said we are willing to talk about all those things. And the BMA has said they will not cooperate with a review that I set up with the Academy of Medical Royal Colleges, the president, Professor Dame Sue Bailey. They won't cooperate. Talking is the way to end this.
Couple of quick last thoughts. Do you now regret implying, even though you think you may not have said it, that people are dying at the weekend in our hospitals because junior doctors want more money for working shifts at the weekend?
I have never said that, but what I have said is we have too many heartbreaking stories of parents who've lost children, people who've lost loved ones because we're not delivering high quality care at the weekend. And I think every doctor wants to solve that problem, and they should sit round the table and help us deal with it.
And the final one about you, I suggested it was your duty. It was Sir David Nicholson, Chief Executive of the NHS in the past, who said, only you could stop this. You must have had some long, dark nights of the soul. Do you ever look in the mirror and think, I'm now the problem? I may not blame myself. I may think I acted with sincerity, but I am part of the problem. I need to go for the sake of the NHS.
Nick, this is likely to be my last big job in politics. And the one thing that will keep me awake is if I didn't do the right thing to help make the NHS one of the safest, highest quality healthcare systems in the world. And health secretaries are never popular. You're never going to win a contest for being the most liked person when you do this job. But what history judges is, did you take the tough and difficult decisions that enable the NHS to deliver high quality care for patients?
Even if that involves alienating the very future of the health service, its junior doctors.
Well, these changes are never easy. But the question is, are you going to make the difficult decisions that mean we have better care for patients, deliver manifesto commitments, and that's what I'm absolutely determined to do.
Jeremy Hunt, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.